welcome back. I'm Kristen, as you see, I'm live here from my home. Let me get this music off here. So yes, I am live again. Welcome back to my weekly Ask Me Anything slash live streams. Welcome to my Instagram folks. Welcome to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. It's going to still be Twitter. And I put on the bottom of the screen, those of you who are on all the horizontal platforms, I put what this is, Ask Me Anything. If you share, now some platforms I can't see your questions on, but usually if you comment on LinkedIn, if you comment on YouTube, if you put something, a comment on the Instagram, and Twitter, I can't see your threads there, but go back. I'll go over the questions I see first, and then I'll come back to your Twitter folks' questions. Thank you to all of you all who have joined right now. We have gotten started, so I'm actually going to just take that part off the screen here. Um, and let's see, gosh, on StreamYard, I realize you can't edit your comments. But yeah, and thank you for the person who hearted. Thanks for the heart. Please do heart and share this. And to the person who is letting me know that we are about a mutual aid request on Instagram, that is one thing that we're going to talk about today. If you don't have questions, I'm actually gonna uh forward basically encourage folks to um donate to several mutual aid campaigns. And then I'm also going to share a resource that I found from at Redmat on Instagram, who also, her name is Tysir, and who's really, for those of you all who are still confused about what's going on and why we should be mindful of what's happening to our siblings overseas. I think the first thing I can say when I say why we should be concerned is number one, there is only one Earth. Like, that has been something that has been showing up for me um, over and over and over again, that we only have one Earth. And basically we can be helping one area, and then if we're not helping another area, it's going to hurt us eventually. Yeah, here in the States, we have a relative comfort, and some of the other, Canada, the UK, and some of the other places where there's not active conflict. But if you haven't been paying attention to what little news sources are honest about what's happening, let me give it to you right here. Using these platforms, being in the world, all of those things, we we are benefiting from the fact that others aren't benefiting. And yeah, we had a civil rights movement here in the United States. This isn't the first time we've had anti-war protests in the United States. This isn't the first time we've had, South African apartheid. They were freed. We all came together. Well, maybe not me personally, because I was a baby when the South African apartheid movement was really heavy, and my parents were young when they were living through segregation in the U.S. South and in the civil rights movement. And even though that this started as an urban planning platform to raise awareness about urban planning, and specifically, I talk a lot about gentrification, specifically the where the intersection of land use and how people build and how people choose to build, and how so many neighborhoods have been built over, and how so many neighborhoods have been enroached over, how lands have been lost. I can't lately, what's been on my mind, and that's why I wanted to rock my red and green and black and white today, for Sudan, for Palestine, for Pan African solidarity. And I really want us as black folks, because that's my perspective I'm coming from, that's who I'm going to speak for today, especially to my Instagram feed. Some of you may have noticed the campaign over the weekend to block certain celebrities, specifically ones that have been attending certain events, where the organizers are not for liberation or justice whatsoever. It's been mainly about the organizers. And in the case of the Met Gala, the story behind the organizer, it talked about coming together before the working classes hordes like run up against us and ruin our thing. First and foremost, like if that's your attitude that if we redistribute wealth and we build better and we add more affordable, well, actually, if we guarantee housing, not just affordable housing, but guaranteed housing. If we do like the Tampa Bay and we guarantee housing and we go in other communities that believe in giving housing first, buying up hotels, buying up apartment buildings, getting people sheltered and helping them with the mental health and the trauma of having been lost their home or lost their families or lost resources. And there's all this emphasis on, people need to work and people need to do this. Here's another thing about working. So many jobs don't want to pay. So many wages are set low. So many businesses are built on a certain wage class for their employees. And yeah, that's not sustainable. And as someone who's 38 years old, I'm in my middle age and I'm seeing what the older generations have done and set forth for myself. And I'm getting that push from younger generations that are coming into adulthood. When I see student activism on campus, taking myself back 20 years to 2004 when I was a high school graduate and looking into going into college. Like, there was so much that I didn't know. There were a few things I was exposed to, and I've always had my concern and care and love for others, and I've always wanted to do the right thing. But I was raised by a parent that really had immersed themselves into the white evangelical movement as much as you can being a black person. I want to make it clear, those of you who are not aware of me, who've never seen me post pictures of my parents, and who see my skin tone and have had questions, both of my parents are black. Now, yes, on both sides, there has been some intermingling and intermingling. I'll just say intermingling, but directly, both parents are descendants of Africans who were brought over here to be enslaved and then who rooted themselves and were able to build and farm and capture land in North Carolina and be land stewards and steward the land. They know a lot about rural stewardship. They know that's their value system. We went to churches, namely the African Methodist Episcopal, as you'll hear referred to as the AME, as well as black led United Methodist churches. Like, that's the background that I came from. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was the first kind of generation to grow up in the city proper. And the irony of it was the first house my parents brought me to had a residential covenant over it. And so now we have a question. I'm going to put this question up on the screen from Kelly Conyer, from LinkedIn. And thank you so much for bringing this question today. I put it on the screen. I'm going to read it for those of you all who are on Instagram. Her question is, I'm interested in learning more about how you suggest addressing land use equity effectively. Um, and I don't mind. This is a Ask Me Anything. So normally I don't get questions on the live feed, so it's okay that you've interrupted my flow. If anything, I love for folks to bring questions to these chats. Otherwise, I'm gonna bring certain things up. Now, I will cut off today a little bit early at 11:45 because I do have somebody that I'm gonna record with today. I'm really excited about. We Last week we had a few technical difficulties recording. I am gonna put the Calendly link for those of you who want to join uh, our our podcast. If you want to be a guest, that is open to you to discuss all these things. But one of the things I am suggesting, we have to first and foremost, we do have to get comfortable. And this is good to start having this conversation in whatever faith community that you belong to, especially now. First and foremost, you should probably make sure that you are actually in a progressive faith community, one that believes that people do have inherent humanity, one that doesn't automatically deem people to a hell or a purgatory if they're not doing things a right way. Um, as someone who's part of who is agender, non-binary, who tends to date lesbians and other non-binary people, and occasionally cis men, as this woman, like I date a lot of people, but of course that puts me squarely in the LGBTQ community, and some of those ideas about who I date and love also shake up people in the church, and also shake up how people think I should relate in the world. We have to be at peace with people. Yes, developers are going, some of them are going to have to take a loss. And I know for my small developers, you're like, well, I can't even get in the game. This is how, I go to auction all the time. Like, honestly, your market for my smaller developers and my equitable wholesalers, where you're trying to capture property and keep it out of the hands of people who will just flip it and turn it into a profit margin, that's different. Those of you who are purchasing land to create cottage courts, which is a type of housing where there's more housing than normal than what's on the lot, and the housing is angled so that people, neighbors, can get to know each other. There's a common front yard. There's this idea of sharing resources, sharing space. uh, and oftentimes that could be an option if you have land, especially if you're like in a rural community and you want to, and you have land and you're not using it, and maybe you donate that land so that the land cost doesn't have to go back into the housing cost. Or you allow people with RVs and tiny homes to like sit on your land. In major cities, we have already, the US Department of Housing and Urban Development hasn't dismantled itself. There are still public housing mandates. Now, how they've been administered over the years is different, but one of the first things every public housing authority can do is open up your list, evaluate your list, make sure everyone on your list is either accounted for. Like, there's some people that got on the housing wait list and they're deceased. So make sure you're cleaning off that list. Some people have moved on. Some people got on the list and then since they had to do it themselves and they managed to get out and ahead, instead of patting yourself on the back for, oh, well, they don't need our housing anymore, ask them what the process is like if they're willing to talk about it, and ask them if there's someone in their family or network that still need that kind of support. And that is one of the ways I feel like we can start addressing land use equitably. I'm going to actually put a link up to my bookshop store, not to promote me selling anything, but in my bookshop.org shop, I have both The Color of Law and Just Action, written by the Rothstein family. They are talk about um, how, at least here in the States, housing was segregated. A lot of the reasons that public housing failed was because you had racist public administrators who did not like the idea, racist and anti black. Because let me be clear, there are a lot of black folks in public administration, and y'all, I know y'all hate it when I call y'all out, but I wouldn't have to call y'all out if y'all weren't like just bent on being hateful and bent on thinking that whatever y'all are doing with whatever administration that you're doing is actually helping somebody. Like somebody is lazy or whatever. Yeah, that might be the case, but at the end of the day, $3,000, $4,000, and $5,000 rents, mortgages, very few of us are sustaining that. If the standards set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, another section of this agency, has set a standard and it is still being enforced, that housing in a region is no more than 30% of an income. Uh, in fact, I didn't plan on putting up the AMI results, but I'm looking that up, and those of you, you'll get your recap emails, and I will also try to put this on the Instagram feed as well. The definition of annual median income, and this is a key. And here in the States, this is a key measure that people determine whether how this is done, and it's different. The income limits are different based on where you live and what your area's per capita income is. In fact, I'm going to link directly to the HUD website. Now, there's a lot here. You could go down a rabbit hole of information here. And I'm actually going to put this on the screen. Um, so, yeah, there's a lot of like links here, but this is where you go to learn about annual median income. And let me see if I can, since I'm on Instagram on my phone and there's a lot, just I'm going to encourage everybody to just go to Google. This is what I just did. I just did this for the folks on the horizontal feeds. Google HUD annual median income. And when you go there, um, let's see. And let me clarify. I'm actually going to link directly to the Color of Law books for you, because that question just came back up again on LinkedIn. I'm going to link directly to the books, specifically the Color of Law. Now, Color of Law really breaks down what happened. Just Action is the solutions focused. So this is, and I'll just throw this up on the screen. So this is my direct link. And yes, and I'll also, Kelly, I'll put your comment up here. And yes, yeah, really, that to me is a good place to start because he is a lawyer. His daughter is a lawyer. They're both attorneys. They're white. They're Jewish attorneys. So there's not like they may have some lived experience because in some cities, redlining laws, the other colors kept Jewish people, Italian people, white passing Mexican people, because it was more Mexicans at the time. Of course, now we have other migrants. And of course, we have Native Americans who technically have been here and they are looped into people of the Spanish speaking diaspora because Spain colonized more of those lands. So yeah, there's all these complications. But either way, people who are not European white have been facing discrimination in the US. There's forms of discrimination in Canada. You even see it in Mexico, and it looks different based on these countries. And then we have the worst situations where right now in Palestine, because we are fighting over access to land. Palestine is a land issue. Congo is a land issue. Sudan is a land issue. South Africa is actually still a land issue. Even though apartheid is over, I read a stat this morning. I'm going to go ahead and link to this in the links I had mentioned, Tysir's work, and I want to go ahead and put um, her Instagram post in the comments here. And for those of you who are already on Instagram, I'm just going to link to her page so that you can find these resources that I'm going to talk about as I finalize today's live stream. But the main reason I'm glad to have that question today about like equitable land use, because we have to make peace with um, we have to make peace with that. Everybody's not going to be able to afford a home. They can't afford a home, and so on this Instagram, this Instagram post really goes into like the concept Audre Lorde's master's tools will not dismantle the master's house quote. This quote is embedded in this Instagram block. You can also Google that speech and it comes up readily. You know, this is something we reference to. And what I liked about this block that Tysir had I highlighted at Red Mat had highlighted was that we may have had the civil rights movement, and that the civil rights movement had created this atmosphere for liberation, or at least the potential for liberation, but it's an unfinished project. Give me 1 second. I gotta. Uh, so basically, um, these things are still in effect. It breaks down how the anti war protests of 1968 mirror today's anti war, anti imperialism, anti um, war machine, anti investment in war. But actually, I've read some other material, which I'll link to in my recap email, about how the evangelical movement, specifically the Jesus movement of the 70s, was a response to anti war protests. And then this was what became the moral majority. And we are staring down extreme spending in war. We're staring down people, um, because Israel is a homeland and a spiritual homeland to so many people. But we're so focused on who gets access to the holy sites. People are living in a segregated apartheid state. Here in the States, you've spent so much money, and we're continuing to spend so much money on policing and policing type resources. Y'all know me. I'm just like, we can push our institutions, and even better, we can provide the resources. If public transit is what I'm thinking about right now. Let me go back to this. Public transit. When the COVID pandemic onset, and by the way, my other reminder, we are still in that pandemic. People are still getting sick with COVID. There are less resources because it's no longer an emergency. But that's the danger when things stop being a big overarching emergency to our major governments. That doesn't mean people don't have their lives ruined. That doesn't mean we need to stop as individuals and groups at the community level, making sure people are taken care of. And honestly, public health organizations need to do better. The healthcare system needs to do better. Healthcare influencers and our other, focusing on our other diseases. Yeah, just because your COVID's not affecting you, or you know specifically what mitigations you need to take, mitigations cost money. HEPA filters, cleaning the air, wearing masks, and wearing the kind of respirators, and actually respirators at this point, like N95K and 95 KF94s and other respirators, the respirators that you can get that don't have metal that you can wear inside MRI machines, the respirators you can get that have the clear box screen, the elastometric respirators that are more permanent, that you don't put over your chin, but they cover your mouth kind of like this. You've seen them. Flow mask is an example of those, and even our gas masks and our P100s. All those things cost money, and we need them because air quality, water quality, those things haven't gone away. And of course, I'm coming to you now, and I'm streaming to you in a country that it's, as of late, we are collecting taxes as a small business owner, as exclusively a small business owner. Those taxes are going to that. We don't have the choices of where the taxes go. I know many of us have been freaking out about the words oligarchy and fascism, but unfortunately, that's where we are. And for those of you, especially those of you who are white, consider yourselves white, white bodied, and that's not your politics, that's not your platform, step in the gap. For those of us who are Black Americans, who we felt like we've already achieved, like the civil rights movement is our achievement, and we shouldn't have to worry about doing anything else, and it's an achievement to be living in these houses and driving these cars and working for these institutions. Think long and hard about how many people are really everywhere. We tell our children, and we still tell our children, it's less of a telling our children now because we were those children that y'all told not to do certain things. But now that the world has changed, art is a lucrative institution. Yet when we went into COVID lockdown, when we were in what I call deep COVID, when we really didn't have access to all the tools we needed, and we learned that we were not given the resources we were being needed, we needed to thrive. Those those things have affect us. We can't leave nobody behind. We can't think because we got ahead and somebody else can't get there. Not everybody processes everything in the same way. Not everybody, people, you don't know what people's do what you got to do, and do what you need to do is. Sometimes that do what you got to do is right here in this head, and you don't really get past that, and you need a friend, you need someone to help you get through working through the challenges that you have. Um, That's why we need expanded in the interim permanent ceasefire. And then in the interim, we need, and then in the long term, we need development patterns that are people centric, that are earth centric. We have the tools to reduce our need of fossil fuels. We don't have to be getting a new phone every year. If anything, Apple need to come up with some other way to make money out of us, or maybe they don't need to be the providers. Maybe we need to they need to sell their stuff. Just like, some of you who have been on the internet and remember computers, like who are my age and older, who have seen computer companies come and go. We can develop new companies. We can develop new things. These companies, they are actually at this point, we are in a new gilded age, and we are coming up on companies who don't value competition. And for those of you who want to harp on, well, capitalism is the way it needs to work. Well, capitalism isn't even working right now. We got too many of the same companies, and we got too many of our resources being locked in one region. So many of our consumer goods are only produced in Southeast Asia. How is that making a stable world? We can trade and we can share, and I love trading and sharing. I love eating other people's cuisines. I love eating everybody else's food and sharing in their cultural things. I love those things. I love traveling. I love going all over this globe, and I have my passport and I have found it, and I need to and once I get it renewed, I'm going to do more traveling. uh we don't It is not safe, it is not secure, it is not good that so much of our money is on the instruments of war and the instruments of surveillance, and we're so worried about who isn't paying their transit fare, and instead we're not worried about who's sleeping on the street, who's not eating, who is getting bombed on, who can't get health care, who's not coming back from COVID. Like, we need to be worrying about those things. And yes, my platform here as a urban, like, centered in, I started kind of in the urban planning, and I talk directly to urban planners because so many people are having this conversation in other rooms. A lot of the things I say here have already been said in sociological rooms. Okay, so I do have a new question. I'm actually going to type it because it came in through Instagram at Sahara Fanini. Thank you so much for submitting your question. I'm going to answer in just a moment. I'm typing it for, and the question is, what advice do you have for aspiring urban planners who are in undergrad and who are unsure about the next steps? And this is a common question. And of course, congrats to all my graduates. Congrats to everyone who's completed their years, especially in this current campus climate, especially if you're on a campus who is, instead of investing in you, they're investing in the people they think will pay for you. They're basically, let's see, I'm just paraphrasing your question, Sahara, for my other feeds. I'm gonna just make a note that there's a question from Instagram. Okay, and I'm actually going to pin your comment right now on Instagram so that people can see. All right, I think. Okay, so we're answering, those of you who are joining the feed, we are answering this question. What advice do I have for aspiring urban planners who are in undergrad? And the bulk of the question is if you're unsure what to do next. So, first things first, make sure that if you are at the right school. Make sure that your professors will support you and what you want to do. They support you reading beyond the text. They support you working in the communities you want to focus on, and they support that your methods go beyond what's written in the urban planning curriculum, because you may have gone into urban planning because you're concerned about how your community is faring in the world, and you may be thinking like me about, we need global liberation, and urban planning is often a tool of the oppressor and the colonizer. How can I decolonize urban planning? How can I make urban planning a tool for the people? And think about your community festivals. Think about your holy days and your celebrations. Think about your artisans. Think about your cuisines, and think about how those things are helpful to you and helpful to your personal growth. Then look at your curriculum and see if that curriculum supports what you want to do long term. Support it truly supports your community. Now, you may not have a choice. You may be in the school that you can afford, the school that's paying your scholarship. Your school may not be behind your back. Well, I'm here as a resource, and there are other urban planners that are here as a resource that openly talk about liberation. Planners Network is kind of a, I wouldn't necessarily say they're anti APA, but whereas APA kind of does sort of a both sides thing, because some of our APA chapters are focused on liberation, are focused on diversity, are examining and openly examining how planning has been a tool for racial discrimination and class discrimination and even misogyny, queer and transphobia, ableism in the past. Planners Network has taken it a step further. They also are doing more work, and they have had members who have been at encampments, members who have openly spoken about decolonizing and ending empirical forms. So, yes, Planners Network, which I'm actually going to put up on both screens. And I need to renew my Planners Network subscription. So, those of you who are Planners Network members, I know I am. Last year, I was a card carrying member. I know I need to do a little bit more with connecting with y'all directly, but I know y'all have the resources for Planners Network. I'm just typing it in to make sure that I'm going to the right place. Yes, plannersnetwork.org. Planners Network, there's student memberships of Planners Network. They also post jobs. Also, Next City, the website, they also have stepped up and really started to do highlight organizations and community work. IOB is another organization that helps communities fundraise for community projects. And so getting to know Planners Network, reading Next City, getting to know what some of the projects that IOB is doing, they'll come in handy for when you're getting ready to apply more of what you're learning in undergrad, as well as being able to challenge anything you're learning in undergrad that doesn't like work with how your community actually functions. That's what I did when I was a master student in public administration and public affairs. I opened up my workbook and I realized, hey, this doesn't tell the full story. Now, this is a great history of how Black America came to be, how we came to live in public housing, how we lost, some of us lost our access to rural lands, but the rural lands part wasn't really there, and that was the part that I knew more about, and I knew that I'd seen public housing and rural lands. So that's how I started the Black Urbanist initially, and then of course over the years I've tried to be like, okay, well maybe with these equity efforts people are listening more and everything, but now I am doubling down on making sure, with through the Defying Gentrification podcast, through coming on and doing these Ask Me Anything live streams and answering your questions. And I really appreciate you all bringing me questions this week. I really love that. I'm going to actually close out a little early, and I'm actually going to scroll on the bottom of the screen some ways that you can support this work. I am terrible at times for asking for help, but I do need help to continue to do this. So, two ways that you can do this: you can support me through Patreon. You can just there on Patreon. I usually do a recap of this newsletter. I usually paste this live stream. I am posting the podcast episodes. Every Sunday I write a little essay on like my fibercraft, like this necklace here. I crocheted and I put it on the string because I'm also going to be doing more fibercraft. That's a for me to kind of process what I'm looking at and also think about from the market side. Okay, what does a fair trade market look like? What does it look like to start doing more with fiber so that we're not enabling slavery? Oh yeah, podcast. So I actually do have a podcast in addition to my own podcast, Defying Gentrification. My I also in fact, let me just link to my blog here. If you go to any podcast networks and search for Defying Gentrification, let me just type in the name Defying. For those of you who weren't aware, still, or you just found this page, I do these live streams partially to promote that I have a podcast called Defying Gentrification that comes out on Fridays. So far, there's 7 episodes. There's also, gosh, and all my fellow urbanist podcasters are gonna like kick me right now because all the names are merging together, but there are quite a few urbanism podcasts. Let me actually go on my. I'm gonna go on Apple Podcasts on my browser to help me jog my memory of the names because it's two in particular that I want to recommend, especially on weeks that I don't publish. Like last week, we had a technical difficulty and I wasn't able to publish. So I want you all to be able to have something to listen to. Okay, here are some podcasts. So Queer for Cities is a brand new one. It just started. Literally, it's focusing on the LGBTQ experience in cities. Then there is, I think it's 4 Degrees to the Streets. I don't quote me. Yes, there's 4 degrees to the street. Well, it's not saying it's coming up, and it might be because of the way I'm searching. I'm searching. Oh, I'm searching regular Apple and not regular Apple Podcast. But yes, 4 degrees to the streets is one. Oh yes, yes. 4 degrees is great. Thanks for the Walking Spartan for shouting that out. And also, urban planning is not boring. That's another one. I've been on both urban planning is not boring. I've been on 4 degrees to the streets. Architecture is poly. Arc is poly for coming from an architecture practitioner. Also talks about liberation in urban planning and architecture. So there's quite a few of us out here that are doing this work. And of course, I years ago podcast I had a podcast called the Black Urbanist Podcast, but then I got away from it. So Defying Gentrification is a brand new podcast. It is back. And for those of you who are on the vertical streams, supporting that podcast via Patreon will allow me to continue to show up here. I'm doing this right now because this is what I know I need to do. Like, this is completely volunteer, but as someone who has been doing this version of the work for 15 years, I've had some contracts, but I've been finding that some of my contracts, and this is people ask me now. This is a question that people ask me all the time. Well, Kristen, why don't you just jump into government contracting? Now, the person I'm recording with is going to challenge me on that, and they see some forms of government contracting as reparations, especially if the money's out there for free. So she's probably going to get me together on that. But I really just like having projects that build in a intermediate step. A lot of our, we have to build something, and building something doesn't happen overnight a lot of times with our planning and architecture projects. So I always love having something that we build. Like when I did, I was part of, those of you who are in Birmingham, Alabama, I was the public engagement lead for the Pratt Park project. Of course, now we have a finished project, and it's a little different than what we planned. But one of the things I wanted those market stalls out there. I wanted it to you wanted to be able to have a place because the library was a home for wedding showers and birthday parties for that predominantly black community. I was like, let's do this building where it's flex. You could have the market, you could have the stalls, and I've heard since COVID hit, like people have been using that. Like I had that vision in like 2016 that we needed to have indoor outdoor market stalls for people. Growing up in Greensboro, we're gearing up for Juneteenth. I want to shout out my colleague April Parker with the architect of Black Space. They're gearing up for Juneteenth. They've got the city involved. And yeah, and Sarah, there's a lot of us out here. Not everybody uses social media. Some of us are we're on the ground. We're at the encampments. We're at public meetings. We're running like small businesses, and we're doing all those things, and we're working together, and we're out here, and all of those things are coming together, and we're here for you. And feel free to DM me, feel free to actually book some time. I do have slots that are there for students and for people who are interested in working with me further. And then of course I do consulting, I do one-on-one consulting. Like if you have a project and you are ready to go, you just need some um inspiration. I'm actually going to put my calendar in the link here, and by the time in about 2 or 3 minutes, this calendar link will be active for all of my force paid um, opportunities, as well as if you want to be on the podcast. So I'm actually going to log off all of I'll put the calendar up on the screen. And of course the patron, and those of you who get the email, my email on Substack, it's called Defying Gentrification, Crafting Liberation, or you can just search for the blackurbanist.substack.com, or you can go to the blackurbanist.com, click on read the newsletter. Everything is still there. Everything is still on my website. The podcast episodes are there. One of the posts even has all podcast episodes that you can listen to. Podcast is on all platforms, including YouTube. If you are streaming on YouTube right now, you can go on over here after I close out this live stream today, and you can catch up on the podcast if you've been missing the Defying Gentrification podcast. You can. I'm working on monetization, so those of you who don't have the budget right now, monetization. Also, I wanted to highlight before I get off the live feed, I want to encourage everybody to go over to Operation Olive Branch. Those are some direct mutual aid requests from our Palestinian siblings who are wanting to get out of Rafah. At this point, Rafah is like ground zero. There's a lot going on that you've been keeping up with. But if you want to give directly to families, there are about 800 families on the list. The intake is actually closed, so we're focusing on feeding and helping about 840 some families. Mother's Day was yesterday in the United States, and I'm a fan of celebrating all Black birthing parents, all birthing parents. Basically, that's kind of how I see Mother's Day now, a birthing parent holiday. And there are several organizations locally. Please support mothers. I want to also highlight at Black Transparency, a Black trans parent who is looking to get settled in Maryland, who needs shelter, who is disabled, whose wheelchair is in storage right now at Black Transparency. That's another mutual aid call that I want to lift up today. And please find someone in your community, the young students who need bailout money for standing up for what they believed in, who have been attacked on these campuses just for having a protest. Years ago, you could protest on campus and they would just leave you alone. They were like, "Oh, it's just the students." But that's the thing. They would not be bothering you. They would not be wanting to shut you down if you weren't powerful. So please keep that in mind. Please keep your power in mind. Um, Even though Alice Walker got a lot of problems herself, and I really wish she would release that transphobia that is in her heart. But the one thing she said was that I will hold on to is that your power, you people lose their power when they think they don't have any. That now that's a word. That's a word that still checks out. You know, a clock can be a bad clock, a broken clock can be right twice a day. I do believe that, but let's keep our eyes on all of our conflicts, Rafah, Congo, Sudan, and here in the States, because we are vulnerable. We are very vulnerable. The same forces that are bombing Rafah have trained many of our police forces, and they are being co-opted and they are being absorbed by our communities, because our communities, instead of listening to us in 2020 when we said abolish prisons and the police and come up with a better solution for healing our families. Many families are disconnected. The foster system and the adoption system is broken. We're not making enough money. Our rents are high. Our food is high. Inflation is happening, and our many of our leaders are not listening. Some are, but not in the right places, not enough time. And yes, we are right now, even the election hasn't even happened yet in many cases, and locally a lot of people are in states and jurisdictions that do not believe in their full civil rights. And so yeah, that this is an urbanism issue, because if you are in a city where you can't thrive, you don't have time to think about what the building looks like. You don't have time to think about that. All you can think about is, I want to get out. And so I'm gonna leave y'all with that. I hate to have to go a little early, but we're getting ready to record. You can watch this live stream back. You can support me on Patreon. You can book time with me to consult with me. That's one way to support me. And I'm on Instagram at Black Urbanist. And if anybody's interested in like my crafting at Chris Pattern, I'm over there as well. And anything you purchase over there, classes, workshops, all that's coming up supports this movement, this work, this way of showing that there is a way beyond what we're doing here in the world. So thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for the questions. I'll wave at the last couple of people that are here on Instagram. And I will see you next time, and listen out for our next episode of Defying Gentrification coming up on Friday. And look for your email. There will be a recap email coming later today with the resources shared here. Until next time.